This is another episode of the Best Book Club. I'm your host, Saselam, aka Nufatora, and with me on this episode, I have ChaosReacon. Is that how it's pronounced?
Yep.
Okay, that's what I figured. Well, thanks for coming on today.
You're very welcome.
So the story that we're going to talk about, I didn't get a chance to read the first extra episode from Tales of the Wasteland, but I did read the second chapter. So let's see here, just to get the exact title of it. Let's see here. Come on.
Tales of the Wasteland Extra Episode 2, Nuclear Wasteland Reprise, Dissoluted Festivities.
Yes, that's the one. So that's a story that's on the slate today, but I kind of want to back up a little bit and draw a page from Hans' book a little bit with his podcast, and because I've seen Chitoro's alchemy trials on the Lucky Fetish forums for as long as I can remember, and so I've
early as 2012. Actually, it might have been more than that.
Yeah, that's I think I joined the forum in 2014, something like that. So it's been on there as long as I've been on the forum, at least.
And then I did the rewrites to that one in 2015. But yeah,
when I was looking at just how many different ones you had, so I updated them in 2015. So it's something that I've been aware of for a long time. I never really looked at the non-human. So the way the board is set up, it's you got the videos, photos, non-fiction stories, fiction stories, and then if you go into the fictional story section, there's a celebrity and non-human subsection, and I never really went into those two. Just always stayed in the regular fictional story section, the main part. But I'd always see the updates whenever I'd go into the last updated posts from your previous visit, or whatever it's called. And I'd always see that. So
one of the very few stories that was ever uploaded in those sections, even though many of them should have actually been put in that section.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess my first question is, like, I've seen you have on your DeviantArt, I've seen you have multiple different titles of stories. Are they all in the same universe?
Yes, at least all of my different stories, they are. The only exception being the non-fetish version of Chitoro's alchemy trials.
Okay.
Actually, I potentially also put in one other story. Same universe, but just not fetish works.
Okay. And are they all connected?
They are, yes.
Okay.
They are kind of separated, but they kind of share the same universe, sort of.
Do they, like, reference each other or
for those that have read all the different stories, there's definitely references here and there between all three series that I'm currently working on, so it's definitely connected in that aspect.
Okay. So basically, I guess what I'm trying to get at is that the most recent one that you put out for Hans contest, I guess in a way it's been a long time coming.
For this one in particular, it will definitely have its moments to shine in one of the other stories, but otherwise it was that perfect time and place because otherwise I wouldn't have had the story if it wasn't for the theme and just getting the idea of how to even go about this story in particular.
Yeah. So it was just because the contest happened at that time, and you had was it an idea that you kind of had in the back of your mind you were mulling over, or like how did this idea come to be?
It was literally just, hey, what should we do for the Christmas contest? Pandemic? Okay, that's what the theme's going to be, and just the wheels started turning, especially with the different series having the supernatural aspect to it, and just going, you know what? I got a perfect idea for this.
Okay. So it was in a little way, it was kind of kismet.
It was kind of what sort?
Kismet.
Unfortunately, I'm not familiar with the term.
That's fine. It's basically just a fancy way of basically saying that everything aligned.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. It was very much, the idea came as soon as the contest theme was brought out. It's like, I didn't think this would work, but this works perfectly for this story in particular.
Yeah. Okay. And so, what was the I mean, I guess just as a quick aside, in case you were wondering, I mean, this is my podcast. You can say whatever you feel like, if you want to curse or whatever. Because I've had a couple of people wonder if you can do it. I've had a couple of people ask, like, "Hey, can I do this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely."
Yeah, that's fine.
What was I gonna say? Oh, that's right. So I remember when you first submitted it. You said in a conversation that it really struck an emotional chord with you. Were you expecting it to go as emotionally deep as it turned out going, or was it just like, all right, I'll just write down this idea and we'll see what happens, or was it something else entirely?
With this, I knew it was gonna be very painful, because just like the first extra story for Tales of the Wasteland, I knew it was gonna go into dark places.
Okay.
But this time around, I knew it was gonna hurt, but it was gonna hurt in a very different way.
Yeah. So I know when I'm writing stories, or when I got to get back into that. I
know that feeling.
I mean, you put out some stuff recently. I haven't put out anything in a year.
Well, I was getting close to that, because the previous story that I released was for Max's contest, which was back in March.
Yeah. I know, at least when I write stories, I never really outline. I just have the idea. I have where I want to go, and then I sort of discover the story as I'm writing it.
Yeah.
So, was this something that you kind of planned out? Like, do you have some kind of huge storyboard that you've planned these things? Because these stories you've been not just Tales of the Wasteland, but Chatoru's Alchemy Trials, and blanking on the other names, but I just looked at them last night.
Black Rope?
Yeah. Well, I can just pull it up real quick because I have a phone.
In that regard, for this, I've only really done it for Chatoru's Alchemy Trials, that I wrote out and I know what I'm planning to write from beginning to end. Where Tales of the Wasteland, that was more of it's a collection of stories between a certain set amount of time, and just going back to that, it's a connected world. For right now, I currently have 3 seasons planned for Chatoro's Alchemy Trials, which season 1 is not done yet, so that's gonna be a while before that happens. But Tales of the Wasteland occurs between season 2 and 3 of Chatoro's Alchemy Trials, and for those that are looking for the signs, there's a lot of foreshadowing, especially in this chapter, of what is to come and what regret some of the characters are facing.
Okay. So, I guess to actually start talking about the actual story, one thing while I was reading it was it kind of struck me was even though I haven't read your other stories, I could really it really felt like these characters, especially oh my god, I'm forgetting. Not Serene, but
okay, Joshi.
Yes, Josh. Yes. It really Joshi really felt like there was a lot of history and emotional weight behind things. Like she had a past and a present and a future. She felt like a real fleshed out character. And I think that is sort of, I think it's benefited and it's sort of a product of the fact that you have been working on these stories for years at a time, and I mean, are you one to do a sort of character bio and really figure out a character before you start with the story?
Those are usually more of a secondary thought to me, but I do try to get the main idea of who the character is, and then just ask other questions to help flesh out the characters later on.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty similar to how I do it. I kind of envy the people who plan everything out ahead of time, because then I feel like it's a lot simpler when you do that. But also,
it's simpler, but it also writes yourself into a corner as well if you do it that way, because then you've already set everything up, and so then, I wasted my time if you deviate from that. But that's not always the case, and that's why rough drafts are there in the first place, is so that you at least have a reference that you can go off of instead of having to create everything on the spot.
Right. And I mean, I wouldn't necessarily waste your time doing that, because you might end up coming back to that later down the road. But I kind of like being open and not planning things out necessarily, because especially with the only story that I've written more of than just one part is I have a bit like story points that I want to hit on, but as I'm writing it, I'm like, oh shit, wait, I should put this, and I come up with these other ideas that work to kind of flesh out the story more and make it so that I'm actually addressing things that otherwise might be completely overlooked. It would make the story feel less realistic to the universe that it's set in.
Yeah, exactly, where you're not then rushing at the very end just to make sure that all the pieces are finally in place.
Yeah, and so that the story actually makes sense and people aren't left with... it's good to leave people with questions and always wanting more, but I definitely don't want to leave people with questions like why wasn't this explained? That doesn't make any sense. Like I want them to answer questions like, oh, what's going to happen next, or where does this character go, like that kind of thing. They want more as opposed to just confusion. All right. So yeah, it just like so. I gotta collect my thoughts so I can properly ask the questions. I mean, if you have any, I like having these as conversations, not just interviews or interrogations. So if you have any like thoughts or things you want to bring up that you want to talk about the story or anything like that, then absolutely feel free to bring it up, and I'd love to talk about it. Like, is there anything that I know you feel? Okay, so I guess I know you feel really, I guess, proud of the ending. Is there any other part of the? I guess what is the part of the story that you are the most proud of writing besides the ending?
The most proud of finally getting to actually show just how gritty the world can be in this universe, where for those who don't know, Joshi is essentially a psionic based character where whatever comes to mind, she can manifest it, whether if it's altering her own body or to some extent with that. And just finally showing what hell she has gone through to get to this point. And it's been shown in previous chapters in more quick, simple fashion of, oh, you try to put her down, she'll hit you back 10 times harder, that kind of stuff. But this was the one story where I really got the chance to just show what type of hell she's been through. Whether if it's just the light moment of just getting thrown around, body just absolutely mangled and destroyed, and just seeing what pain she has to go through just to keep going.
Yeah, it definitely came across. It didn't feel like you were beating the readers over the head. And I guess just from my perspective, I can't speak for anybody else, but it didn't feel like you were really beating me over the head with the past. You weren't bogging the story down with talking about what's already happened. You wormed some details in that clued readers in to what's already happened and how Joshi is feeling, but you didn't, like I said, you didn't focus on the past so much. I think you really captured the essence of past trauma and PTSD in a way.
And just bringing everything into the moment and letting it just be paced out properly without bogging it down with. And with that, it can be subjective, but in the same vein, it's not being wasted with unnecessary information. It just felt right.
Yeah.
Which that's definitely something I was proud of with this story, that at least with the bit of feedback that I got from it so far, is that it felt right. It didn't feel long. It didn't feel short. It just felt right.
Yeah, absolutely. And you will be getting more feedback once the final judge from the contest is done judging all the stories.
Holy anxiety-inducing things.
Don't worry.
Even earlier today, just getting the notification, just going, oh, is it the feedback? No.
You'll know. I kind of wrote a little bit of a story myself. I like to do that. But yeah, as Hans and I have both given our critiques so far, and I think we both gave some pretty good feedback. But I think the scene that really that captures that the best is when Joshi finally gets a moment to maybe not relax her guard, but just loosen up a little bit and not be so tense, and then her emotional baggage and all her thoughts and everything just hits her, and she can't contain it. Because as far as like just from this story, she clearly has not had the time to process what she's been through, like just battling hardcore against these demons in this post-apocalyptic nightmare of a world. There's no time to process, and when she finally gets that moment, it instead of pursuing what she wants and she gets what she needs in a way, it just overwhelms her and she can't contain it because she hasn't done any introspection. See, how am I really doing? And I guess you can't. I get it. I think that really it works. That scene really works on multiple levels because like it even in the way that it kind of it helps develop the world and make it feel more real. Like because it really is a post-apocalyptic nightmare. So you really don't get those moments. And when you finally do, you're not necessarily able to control how you are. Because, I mean, after a certain point, like, people work their whole lives. And then when they finally get to retirement, they don't know how to relax. They don't know how to unwind. And so they just start working more for fun. I think that's pretty similar to what's happening here. And that basically the scene between Joshi and Zorine is when they first start getting intimate is I think it's really well done.
Thank you very much. And that's definitely a good angle to even look at it because it's mostly there, though I would describe it more as it's not that Joshi doesn't have the time to
process.
Just process what she's went through. It's how much of a wall she's built up for herself.
Okay.
And just not that she just doesn't have the time, but what barriers she had to create for herself just to keep going.
Yeah.
Especially in that moment, and I was a little worried when writing that scene of does it feel forced that Zorine is telling her story to her, which hopefully it came across a little bit more seamlessly of, hey, this is someone I'm romantically interested in. I want to at least let them know so that it's not just a big in your face later on and causes some issues down the line. And just a lot of it just brings back memories for Joshi. And just the regrets coming back to her.
Absolutely.
The loved ones that she left behind just to complete the journey that she's currently on.
Yeah. Maybe to the like really casual readers, they might think it was just thrown in there as a way to have Joshi start thinking about what she's gone through. But once you look just a little bit deeper and you sort of keep in mind what kind of world it is, for one, you don't really get much time to process and go through what you're experiencing and what you have been through. And two, it's when you have these demons and things going all over the place and killing everybody and all that, then you really don't have much time for basic human interaction in general.
Mm-hmm.
So, or to form connections. So it really it kind of does fit in that in one of those very rare moments, Zorine would try to reach out and make some kind of connection with another living, conscious, feeling person.
And definitely living as the top.
Yeah. Definitely.
But yeah, that's especially for the two nuclear winter stories. That's definitely how I want the world to feel. Is that humanity is sparse. That it's a time before we had access to vehicles where we could just easily just move to different cities just within the matter of hours. But at this point, the world's in such disarray where there's still humanity, but it's now part of the journey where Joshi has now been moving for days on end without seeing another living soul.
Yeah.
And just how much that was getting to her, and especially with it being on the anniversary of what happened in the previous Nuclear Winter story.
Yeah. Which, incidentally, I just took a glance at it. It's at 13K views right now. So congratulations on that.
Mm-hmm. It's actually closer to 14. It was like 13.7K last time I checked earlier today.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the last one came out a little over 4 years ago. So, wow.
So one hell of a sequel to come back to.
Yeah, a little bit. And I mean, as I am one of the judges for the contest, I don't want to give away the feedback that I put in that. So I'm trying to go outside of what I've already put down, so I'm not showing the tricks up my sleeve, so to speak, as a magician. I mean, I guess because it is such a big thing in the story, I guess I have to kind of retread the ground. The action, it kind of reads like an action movie. It's.
I'm definitely glad that it did come out that way.
It's intense and visceral. I can picture basically what's happening without having too much of a picture of who the actual characters are. Well, I guess technically three main ones being Joshi, Zareen, and the demon. But I mean, like when I read Harry Potter, I didn't really picture what they looked like. I just kind of pictured the scenarios they were in, and that kind of I didn't. So, let's see here. Yeah, I mean, basically, it's just it feels like it feels like it's actually happening. I guess without
when you're reading, like you can almost see the characters without it being pushed into your face the entire time. Like the different clothing is actually being talked about. What are on these characters, and not in super clear detail that you read it and there's no other way to decipher it, but you get enough of a picture that you could see said characters.
Yeah.
With the example with Harry Potter, you got like the very brief description, like if I recall correctly, at the very beginning of the story. But other than that, just a few mentions of maybe the school uniforms and just some of the features that are on said person. But beyond that, it's mostly a blank statement of, this is Harry, but you don't get the full picture of what Harry is. What does he like to wear? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, J.K. Rowling brings those features up when the story calls for it, like the one part where they're waiting outside Snape's classroom for potions, and Malfoy uses a spell on Hermione that makes her teeth continuously grow larger. Like, it's, you sort of, you remember that she has buck teeth, but then it's not constantly, like, these things aren't constantly referenced, and I think you do the same thing as well, like with Joshi and the fighting. It's like, I think at one point, do you bring up, like, before that, like in the beginning, that she has a ponytail?
In this story, I don't recall if I made mention about her ponytail.
Okay.
Which,
Well,
if I'm forgetting, then yeah, that should have been a detail just in case. This is a brand new story for the reader, but in the same vein, like, this is how many stories in of already describing Joshi and just the brief hairstyle choices that she has. And then having that different pictures on my page of what she looks like.
Right. And I think that you do that, just that little descriptor really well with the ponytails, where it actually has some kind of impact on the story, that it gets pulled by the demon. It's not just the classic, oh, this is just a random name. Oh, this is Sarah, and she's
just listing off the descriptors just in one paragraph and moving on.
Exactly. In the very beginning, like, she's always Sarah. She's tall, blonde, and very curvy, and wears these clothing. And yeah, I mean, that's good and all if you want to just have a reader just quick.
This is what the person looks like. Let's move on.
Yeah, like, this is what the character looks like. This is either someone gonna give a wedgie or get a wedgie. This is what they look like, so you know. But instead, I absolutely much prefer just to have a couple bare bones details and sprinkle in a little here and there as they become relevant to the story, and in that way, the reader can engage more with it and become more invested, so they kind of fill it out what the characters look like in their head.
Yeah, exactly. And just getting that nice pace of the story, that you're not just getting this wall of exposition of, oh, this is what this character looks like, this is their personality, okay, now let's move on with the rest of the story. It's now being brought up and what information is actually important at the moment. Do you need to know what the hairstyle is? No, we can get back to that if it's actually that important. Otherwise, there's other stories that go into it.
Exactly.
Instead of rehashing it.
Yeah, if it actually has relevance to the story, it's because in everyday life, we're not like, people aren't just like commenting on, like, every day. They're like, oh, hey, you're wearing a really cool shirt, or your hairstyle looks really cool. Like, people don't look at those kind of, I mean, we don't really have conversations about these things very often. So it's so much better to weave details indirectly into the story, like having her ponytail pulled in the fight, as opposed to stopping the story itself, describing a character, like, putting a pause on the story, and then hitting resume so that you can get some description out of the way. It's much cleaner the way you did it.
Yeah, exactly, and it's also putting it in the right places as well. Because an example would be as during the intimate scene with Zorine and Joshi, like, what does Joshi's ponytail matter in that moment unless she was taking out her hair tie?
Or Zorine was pulling her hair as the top.
Yeah, exactly. And so you want to have it where it becomes relevant. Otherwise, what information does that actually do in said moment other than as a descriptor?
Yeah. Something that I wasn't sure about was when Zareen was first introduced, and she's speaking. Is she speaking Dutch?
Nope.
Or what language is she speaking?
She's speaking Belarusian.
Oh, okay. And so is she a native? Is she from Belarus?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess the thing that was a little confusing to me was then she was speaking purely in Belarusian, and then when Joshi needed her to speak in English, and it sort of started to feel like she was. I guess I couldn't really tell if it was just like she learned a language she was speaking, or like, and then because she did somehow jump from Belarusian to English pretty quickly and extremely fluently too.
Well, at that point, it might be considered lazy, but in the same vein, English is one of the big languages of the world, so it may not be like Chinese, where that's the business language, but there's enough countries where English is a second language that it's at least common enough that if someone wanted to learn English, they could at least get something for it, and then there's the excuse for this just to make it so the story goes a little bit cleaner instead of stopping every few dialogue, just going, "What?"
Right.
I didn't understand you. What?
Yeah.
And so there is that tiny bit of suspension of disbelief for moments like that, which that's understandable if that's not realistic. But in the same vein, just it's still a realistic possibility that someone knows English enough that they can at least have the conversations. And it also helped shape some of the dialogue where it doesn't sound perfectly English.
Yeah. Yeah, and you do sprinkle throughout the rest of the story where Zareen sort of has these little things in Belarusian. Let's see here. What's one of them? Like
Now, hopefully Google Translate gave you the accurate translations.
What's the other one? I'm trying to, when she would like call her by a pet name or something, and what is this? Where are you? Like Poljim, if that's how you pronounce it. Poljim, I don't know.
Because unfortunately I don't speak Belarusian. So hopefully Google Translate gave me the accurate translations for those brief moments. But if I recall correctly, it's pretty much my love or my soulmate, that types of little stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it does definitely make sense that she would know English, because it is kind of a pretty universal language. Is there? I guess it hasn't really been out long enough. I mean, you got a lot of exposure on it, and you got a couple comments on there. Is there anything that people haven't picked up on? I guess from the little feedback you got, is there anything? Maybe this is a two-part question. Is there anything that the people haven't quite picked up on yet that you're hoping they notice, or anything that you're hoping people will notice through subsequent readings or anything like that?
At this point, I wish I got more feedback, because for the most part, it's thanks for writing, or hey, that was a nice story, and that kind of stuff. And so I don't really get too much feedback, unfortunately.
That definitely changed ours.
Unlike the early days of Lucky Fetish, where I would have some friends comment, and they would actually talk about the story of, ooh, this moment, I wonder what that's all about. And it's like, Ooh, yes. Yes.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
for this one in particular, it's mainly the foreshadowing
Mhm.
of what is to come in Satoru's alchemy trials.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's mainly it, because at this point it's really meant to be a self-contained story, but in the same vein, it's one of those extra stories that helps develop the character and what's this person gonna do when they understand little of what's going on, where did they mess up,
Right.
and just the hurt that comes from that.
Yeah, I mean it it's like as much as we ask for feedback, people just don't give it. And that really is like one of the best ways to improve is like I mean we have our own ideas of what the story looks like. We could see it from one perspective, but hearing about it from someone else's perspective, it's completely different. And I'm guessing since Hans just posted the contest winners 6 minutes ago, that
I will tell them to just to look
all the people will be receiving their feedback. So you'll shortly be getting some feedback that's pretty comprehensive, especially from me, because I know that I really appreciate good and in-depth feedback, so I like to give it.
yeah.
And almost all of it should be very different from what I've said so far here.
Yeah, where I definitely appreciated that, especially with Max's contest, where just getting that feedback in general of was I making any grammatical errors and that kind of stuff. Because until that point that Hans pointed it out, I'm like, fuck, I've been writing lead that wrong this entire time.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, you might not notice some
And it's
things.
just moments like that you don't realize. And then you just want to hear what people liked, what people didn't like, so that you have at least another view to at least take another understanding from of was the idea that you're trying to work with, do you need to work on it a little bit better, or was it just not a strong idea in the first place? It still happened, but at least it gives you an idea of what can you do to try to be better instead of just, all right, here we go, and nothing.
Yeah,
And not from just being arrogant of, oh, I'm so good at this and all that. Like when you do get that kind of feedback, it's like, all right, the story's not for you. Thank you for the feedback though. Or if they're being an ass about just kind of giving just a mocking answer in return. Like, granted, that's not an appropriate way to handle it, but in the same vein, it just makes for an entertaining situation, especially when you can get when you don't even make mention and someone else is able to tell the other person that they're just flat out wrong.
mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, I didn't even need to do it. This person already knows that this story wasn't meant for you.
Uh-huh. I mean, at the end of the day, they gave you an extra view, so they're helping you out regardless. I mean, I haven't really gotten a whole lot of feedback in general, but it seems like the best is when people give constructive feedback. You kind of just ignore
Yeah,
the people
exactly.
who are just like, oh, this is trash. Okay, so what would you do better if it's so terrible? Tell me what you would do better about it, so I can get better.
It's that feedback where you don't just want positive feedback. You want to know where you do mess up, but in the same, you also crave of, oh, this story was bad. It's like, all right, what did you not like about it? And you just don't get a reply, and it's like, I want to know.
Exactly, because that might be something that critical that you're missing out on that you might never know.
Exactly.
I in general with feedback, I prefer to get mostly what I can do better, how can I improve, and then I'll just like a little bit of I really you did this part really well and that kind of thing. Because I mean it's at the end of the day, I'm pretty aware of what I can do really well. Just in general, outside in writing or outside of it, I'm aware of what I can do well. I'm not so much aware of what I can do better or how I'm lacking.
And I think
And
we'll struggle with that.
what's that?
And I think that's something that we all struggle with, is that we know what we can do well with, but even though we are self-critical, we don't know what other people will see.
Yeah, you don't know what
It's
you
hard
don't know.
to get better because, you just don't know. You're not getting the subjective feedback from other people of, hey, did you consider doing this? And it's like, no, I did not. Or, yes, but I appreciate that you're at least taking the time to help me out with this.
Exactly. Yeah, it could definitely give you other ideas of where to go off of, and maybe you already have thought about that, but the way they say it puts it in a new light, and you're able, oh yeah, you know what, I could actually use that in a different way than I was originally thinking.
Mm.
Basically, whoever's listening, give good feedback on stories. Give positive and constructive feedback. Don't just say, it was shit, or it was great. Say why every time, because that's what we thrive on.
Or just mostly important that even if you don't think your opinion really matters for the story, we just like to hear it regardless if it is positive or negative. We at least self-respecting writers want to have that feedback. We want to know if we're actually doing things well, because I think that's partially the reason why so many of the writers that I've discussed with them, how many of them have the imposter syndrome going on, is that while some will acknowledge that they have the skill, not many of us will just get the feedback to just acknowledge that we're actually at that point, or just simply understand what we are doing, what we could do better, and such.
Absolutely. So I guess
I don't have to deal with that.
yeah. So I guess very shortly you'll be receiving my feedback and everybody's feedback from the story. But is there anything that we haven't talked about with this story that you'd like to touch on, or anything that you think we should expand upon?
If you want to talk about potentially some of the inspirations, maybe.
Absolutely.
If you're curious with that.
Absolutely. I'm that's why this is called the book club. We discuss everything about the story.
Yeah, because I know when I was writing out the story, getting closer to the finale, just kind of geeking out with one of my D&D friends that's also one of the other writers within the group, just geeking out that the inspiration for the plague demoness, and just going, man, there's a slight reference to Has Been Hotel, Hell of a Boss in here, and just going, God, that was so fun to just write her personality, just have it just oozing out, just dancing about as if it's no one's business, but making a grand show of it.
Mm-hmm. So this is basically what I'm hearing, is that this story, these would you say then these stories are inspired by D&D?
Not this one in particular. That's more of the Black words, now going back to a fantasy style setting.
Okay.
And especially and I definitely need to finish the previous Christmas story that I was working on and get Nova more integrated with that series.
Mm-hmm.
Where that one's more filled with all the other different D&D characters that I've made over the years.
Okay. So there's a little bit of, but there is a little bit, because I mean, as far as I can tell from the times that you've called Joshi the Black Rogue, that is the same character from the Black Rogue, right?
Yeah,
just to be sure.
they
So
are
yeah,
one and the same. The
okay.
one's just one hell of a lot older than the other.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So I guess in a way it is technically from D&D. So was there anything with this story that you were hoping to put in that just didn't quite fit?
Not exactly. Like, there were some notes that I ultimately disregarded, and ultimately the alternative ending, or the original idea for the ending, was that Zorine was gonna turn into a zombie and Joshi was gonna have to put her down.
Ooh.
And so I'm like, I don't want to write it, but ultimately I like the idea more that Joshi is just absolutely confused as to why her powers aren't saving someone that she cares for.
Yeah.
And that it just worked in a lot better of just trying to cling onto that life that, unfortunately, due to I don't think arrogance is the right word, but the single-minded focus nature that Joshi was at that point, not realizing the consequences of just having the bigger picture instead of just dealing with the demoness because, she's suddenly a bigger threat than she initially realized.
Right. So is that original ending something you would end up writing out at some point? That sounds like something I'd be very interested in reading.
Potentially. At this point, I prefer what I ultimately went with, where this was just simply the rough notes of what I had an idea for the story as a whole, and that it was gonna be an even more downer ending than it already was.
Yeah. I mean, have you ever read Bleach or seen the anime?
I've seen some of the manga chapters and some of the anime, so I'm aware of it. I'm just not fully versed in it.
Okay. Well, there is one part where one of the characters, I guess, is evil, and he finally comes to his senses right when he's dying. So I'm wondering if you could maybe do something like that. Like right at the end, Zorine comes back and is as conscious instead of just a zombie. Just to give it a little bit of heartfelt.
With how the story goes, I ultimately don't want to spoil it too much, but yeah, there are dark futures ahead for Chato's Alchemy.
I mean, if this one story is anything of an indication, then there's absolutely going to be plenty more to look forward to, and a lot of hardships ahead. Are there any teasers that you wanna? What's that?
Yeah, I was actually just about to say that especially with the Tales of the Wasteland stories, mainly these two and one other story I plan to write in the future. There is a reason why I'm showing Joshi just going into this dark place and just being beat. What feels like the world is just beating her down. is that ultimately the final season will be going into a dark place for Joshi.
You said you had 3 seasons planned out. Is it going to be like a 3-part story then, like a 3-act play with different scenes
sort
and
of.
chapters?
Pretty much. With the actual non-fetish version of Chotoro's Alchemy Trials, it's actually 5 seasons. Chotoro's Alchemy Trials just starts in the middle, but from Chotoro's point of view. And that's probably the reason why some of the characters already feels like they already have history and such. But now it's just coming in from a fresh pair of eyes.
Yeah. Very interesting. Is there anything else that you are currently at liberty to say with the future of Tales of the Wasteland, Chotoro's Alchemy Trials, The Black Rogue, or any other future stories you have in mind? Anything whatever the word is, non-confidential or there's an E word I can't think of right now.
The only thing I can confirm at this point without it being too... Well, it's kind of a spoiler, but in the same vein, it's not too much that I have to hide behind lock and key, is that Zorin will return at some point.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, that's a tantalizing tidbit.
Now, I just need to actually get off my lazy ass and actually write stories that lead up to it.
Yeah, well, it's... now you have... whoever listens to this, you got to press chaos to get on working on it, so we can all consume that material later down the road whenever he decides to release it. We'll just say for now it's in the works.
Yeah, I'll just confirm it right now that it will be in the Black Rogue storyline. So
okay,
if it happens in the other stories, it's not set in stone if it will occur. Mm-hmm. Like if Zorin will appear in flashbacks or within memories or dreams, that kind of stuff. But yeah, it is planned that she will return.
Okay.
Give that Marvel cinematic ending right there.
Hey, it's something. All right. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about or mentioned that you wanted to touch on?
At this point, I think we covered a good portion of it where I can't currently think of anything else other than I'm glad that I finally got around to Berserk within this last year or two. If people could pick out some of those inspirations in my writing.
Okay. You're talking about Berserk, the anime/manga.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, that's a classic. I have yet to read that one.
Ooh, it is one of those stories that you want to read the manga, but if you don't, 97, even with its cut content.
Yeah. Well, I always read the manga over the anime anyway, so...
There we go. Now you'll get the best story, the best character development I've seen in a long time.
Well, I mean, have you ever read or seen Full Metal Alchemist?
Yes.
Well, then there's no argument there.
And that's definitely a good example of how character development is, but just saying now, just from the stuff that I've seen of the manga, Berserk is on a different level when it comes to some of its character development.
Oh, I can't believe you. I'll have to read it myself, but I don't think I'm going to believe you even then. All right.
You were for that. Lost Children arc. For those who understand, you know. You fucking know.
Well, I mean, Fullmetal Alchemist and Cowboy Bebop. I think that's some of the best character development in all of storytelling.
I don't disagree. And I still need to finish Cowboy Bebop. Just not the Netflix adaptation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, don't even bother with it. As soon as I saw the casting for it, I was like, I'm not going to watch this. It's just going to ruin it for me. And I
didn't heard bitching from the cast members, I'm like, no, they're not going into this faithfully.
No. Yeah. I don't need to see the fact that they didn't have Ed or Ein. Nah, I'm good.
Well, in fairness, they do, but in the same vein, just the changes that they've done to the adaptation, it's like, okay, now you kind of ruined Ed's character because of how you changed the world.
Yeah, and Ed is the best character in that show.
I definitely can't wait until I finally get to that portion of the anime.
Oh, man, it's so good. And I didn't even realize there was a movie until a little bit ago, so I bought that immediately. So...
Still need to get to scenes, and it's like, I can't wait to get there.
Oh man, years and years ago, one of the first YouTube videos I ever favorited was the ending of the very, very ending of Cowboy Bebop. I didn't know. I knew about Cowboy Bebop just from watching Late Night Toonami and that kind of thing, but I never actually seen it, and I'd seen like an episode or two, but that ending has always stuck with me. It's just one of the single greatest pieces of animation I've ever seen. It just completely says everything.
Years because my Toonami was whatever it was that YTV had back in the 90s and early 2000s. It's like, well, I didn't grow up on Toonami, but at least I had something.
Yeah, I mean something. And that's really where I think that's really where anime started to come to Western audiences was that like late night block.
Yeah,
that's how I discovered a lot of. I mean, that's how I discovered all my favorites. Let's see, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I got five small tattoos for Fullmetal Alchemist, and I have one bigger one. I'm planning to get a really big one on my shoulder.
Oh, there we go.
To finish out my sleeve. But I think that's enough rambling about anime for the podcast. We can continue this conversation after we're done with the podcast.
It's definitely in theme with me, as I usually put anime as one of the tags in my stories.
Yeah. All right, so this has been another episode of the Best Book Club. Thanks again for coming on ChaosReacon.
Thank you very much for having me.
Check out Tales of the Wasteland. Check out Chatoru's Alchemy Trials, The Black Rogue. If there is the smaller stories that he's put out, is there anything that you'd like to plug?
Mainly for right now, just the latest Tales of the Wasteland story, and hopefully getting my ass back in gear and being more creative in the next year, if not just in general.
Yes, you and me both. All right. And with that, leave a like, subscribe, comment what you want to listen to, what stories you want me to talk about, who you want to be on. If you'd like to be on, let me know. Chaos, you're always welcome to come back.
Well, we still have the first story to go over.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we'll have to do an episode about that in the future. Well, this has been another episode of the Best Book Club. I will catch you next time.